So I suppose, is there any, we've talked about having a decision-making journal and those lists, emotional intelligence, the kind of impact that has. Do you have any other, I suppose, useful tips or things that you've picked up along the way, or maybe that you've helped your clients or other leaders work on?
Yeah, well, just a final one, and it's in the decision journal, depending on how you use this. But a couple of things I think that are really worth doing when you're making a decision is to write down for yourself at the time you're making a decision, what do you think the range of outcomes are likely to be? Because it isn't going to be, unless it's a simple decision, there isn't an outcome. Your kind of best and worst case, and your most likely. It's really useful information because it gets you to think about, okay, what's the worst case based on this? What's the best case and what's the most likely? So that in itself is really good to help you focus on the range of outcomes. And also afterwards, because the whole point of doing this kind of reflection is that after the decision, a couple of months down the road, you look back, how accurately did you predict? Like if you're finding that your predictions are way off, there's something not quite right with your decision making. Yeah. But if you're finding that when you look back and say, you know what, I mean, I'm not exactly at what the most expected, or my expected case, but it was within the range of what I thought it was going to be. That's really useful. And the second thing I would always encourage people to record are the options that they looked at and decided not to go with, and the reason they rejected them at the time. And the reason they rejected them is the really important one. Because as you said, with hindsight afterwards, if something hasn't worked out, we say, oh yeah, I should have gone with the other option. There was an X or a Y and I went with Y. Why did I do that? You can look back and say, well, look at the reason I rejected X for the following reasons. And you might look and say, actually, you know what? Those are actually valid reasons.
Yeah.
So those are two things I think are really worth doing. You can feed them into your decision journal, but even if you're not doing a decision journal, I think those are really important things to record when you are making a decision. So that's my final tip of the day for me. What about you, Julie? What's your last tip to share with us?
Oh, I feel like I have a few.
Okay, I'll give you more than one.
I'm trying to think now what's the best one, but it's kind of touching on what you're saying there, but even just reminding yourself that you're not objective and you have biases. Yeah. I think that, that can be a problem in itself, is if we assume I'm completely objective, I have no biases here. Like, our brains love taking shortcuts. Yeah. They want to save power, they want to fill in gaps and seek out patterns. And it does that with no real effort on our part. So it's easy to forget that we're doing this automatically because we're just, designed to not to know how little we know, as Kahneman would put it. But, so I suppose even just reminding yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just questioning it, keeping an open mind. I think that will be a tip in particular, when some people, they might find once they set their mind on something, they just will not let that go. They're kind of saying, and like that can be an asset, it can be brilliant, but it might also mean that if someone else comes up with a different solution, that they might dismiss that, or they could take it personally that people don't agree with them, So I suppose with that tip, it's kind of like a healthy amount of doubt. It's not saying constantly doubt yourself and always go with someone else's idea. It's just kind of saying, if you remind yourself that you're coming from a place of, subjectivity, bias, emotion, your own upbringing, culture, all these different things are having an impact. If we're reminding ourselves of that, it can just remind us that we need to be open-minded. There are alternate solutions that could be effective.
I love it. I really like that. I mean, that's like, we're not as rational as we think we are. Yeah. And maybe come back to something even where you started off about how we look at the world. Like, the way the saying is, like, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. Yeah. So that's a starting point.